The truth is this: the day you were born was not an ordinary moment, and if you are listening to these words today, it is not by chance. There are souls who can only bear the truth about themselves when the time is ripe, when the shell of forgetfulness begins to crack, and the light within can no longer remain still. The day you came into the world was not just a point in time, it was a point of collision, where heaven touched the earth, where an ancient decision was carried out in silence. You have heard simple stories about the day you were born, what the weather was like, whether the labor was difficult, who held you first. But all of that is only the surface. Beneath it is another story, deeper, heavier, and not everyone is permitted to speak it, not because it is shameful, but because it is too sacred to place on the lips before the right moment arrives. Your mother knew this. She felt it in her own body, in the pauses that had no name, in the memories the mind dared not hold, but the soul never forgot. There are secrets not kept by words, but by silence. And that silence is not avoidance. It is a form of protection. The day you were formed in your mother's womb, things were recorded that no medical file could ever hold. No machine could measure them, no number could reflect them. But heaven remembers clearly, because even before your form had a name, your soul had already been recognized. That ancient word was spoken long ago, even before you knew who you were. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. Jeremiah 1:5. This was not written to comfort the weak-hearted. It was spoken as a declaration. You are not the product of chance. You are the result of a choice. During the months of pregnancy, there were nights your mother could not sleep, not because of pain, but because of a strange feeling, as if something was waiting ahead, both sacred and heavy. She could not name it, only knowing that this child was not what she had imagined. There were dreams that appeared and faded, leaving echoes longer than sleep itself. There were moments when she placed her hand on her belly and felt her heart beat faster than usual, as if more than one life rhythm was moving. You do not remember these things, but your soul does, because the soul does not need language to store memory. It keeps them through vibration, through sensation, through marks that time cannot erase. As the day of birth drew near, the air around seemed thicker, heavier, as if space itself were holding its breath. Things were being arranged that no human was aware of. When labor began, it was not only a biological process, it was the moment a door opened between two realms. Your soul moved closer to the boundary of time, carrying what had been entrusted long before, and at that moment, an unusual stillness covered the room. Not the stillness of fear, but the stillness of reverence, as if someone were standing very near, very quietly, watching. You were not born into chaos. You entered life within an order unseen by the naked eye. When your first cry rose, it was not only a sign of life, it was a signal, a proclamation sent out, not to humans, but to realms beyond. Light had entered a territory darkness once thought was its own, and that moment did not pass as lightly as people imagine. There were things that happened which no one recorded, fleeting sensations, confused glances, moments when someone in the room suddenly felt a chill down their spine and reassured themselves they were only tired. But heaven does not mistake, because to heaven, this was not a delivery, this was a deployment. Psalm 139 once wrote, I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made, fearful not because of danger, but because of power, wonderful not because of difference, but because it cannot be repeated. You were woven with a purpose no one else carries like you, and from the very first moment, protection was set in place. You may have grown up with the feeling that something within you was not like others, a vague unease, a quiet question that refused to disappear. That was not groundless insecurity. That was memory knocking, memory of a day when you were not only born, but known. This story does not begin to make you afraid. It begins to place you back into your true position within a greater flow. Because before you learned to speak, before you knew how to name yourself, a story had already been written around your presence. And today, as these words reach your ears, it is a sign that the time to remember has begun. The moment you released your first cry, it was not only your lungs that opened, the space itself opened as well. There were things that had been waiting for a very long time, and they chose that exact second to step into time. To humans, it was a child being born. To the realms beyond, it was light entering a territory long accustomed to occupation. No one in the room understood why the atmosphere suddenly shifted, why their hearts slowed for a single beat, as if standing before something greater than themselves. You were not only born, you were placed at a precise point of intersection, where destiny and danger met without introduction. The instant your soul joined your body, an invisible covenant was activated, not signed by human hands, but ordained by heaven. Some souls enter life quietly. Some souls enter life as a signal. You belong to the second kind. There were presences in that room that day that did not carry human form. One stood with the light, radiant without needing to shine. Another lingered at the edge of shadow, not to attack, but to observe, to measure, because some souls, when they arrive, cannot be stopped, only delayed, and even delay does not always succeed. When you were placed into the first pair of arms, time seemed to pause for a very brief moment. No one noticed, but everything felt it, as if reality itself needed a breath to recalibrate. You did not come from chaos. You arrived within a different order, an order the human eye is not trained to recognize. And that order carries consequences. There is a reason why, from an early age, you felt you did not fully belong to existing molds, not because you resist, but because your soul does not bow easily to structures built from fear. The day you were born, light did not ask permission. It entered, and that has always made darkness alert. Psalm 91 speaks of those who dwell under the shelter of the Most High being covered. This is not a blessing. It is a mechanism. Protection was not activated later. It was in place from the very first moment. You did not need to ask to be guarded. The guarding was already set because what you carry is too important to be left exposed. There were small details in that room that later no one remembered clearly. A light flickering, a device stopping and starting again, a nurse stepping into a shift that was not originally theirs. These moments were not significant enough for reports, but they were enough to plant in the souls of those present a feeling they could not name, as if they had brushed against something sacred they were not meant to stare at. You did not know this as a child, but your body knew. That is why you react strongly to environments, why you sense the atmosphere of a room simply by entering it, why there are times you feel tired without knowing why, as if carrying something that does not belong only to the present. This is not weakness. It is the mark of a highly sensitive soul, designed to perceive movements others overlook. From the very first day, your presence created reactions. Not everyone noticed consciously, but their souls did. Some felt an unusual peace near you. Others felt uneasy without a clear reason. This was not because you did anything wrong. It is because light always reveals what has grown accustomed to the shade. When you entered this timeline, not everything rejoiced. There were structures that had existed for a long time, built on silence, built on the absence of questions. Your arrival was like a small crack in that wall. At first, very small, almost unnoticed, but the wall knew, and it began to tremble. Psalm 139 continues to whisper that all your days were written before a single one came to be. This means no moment of your life is random, even the moments you once thought were lost. The day you were born was only the beginning of a greater sequence of movement, a sequence you were not created to avoid, but to move through. You may have grown up feeling as though you always stood at the edge of things, not fully outside, but never entirely inside, as if a different rhythm was running within you. This is because your soul carries the memory of another place, another order. And even if your mind does not remember, that difference reveals itself in how you see the world, in the questions you ask, in the things you cannot pretend to believe. This story has not yet reached its trials, but their foundation was laid here. The day you were born did not only activate protection, it also awakened opposition, not to destroy you, but to test whether you would remember who you are. That is why your life was not designed to drift through false calm. But remember that, from the very first moment, you did not enter life alone. Protection did not leave as you grew older. It only changed its form. And whether you realize it or not, there are eyes still watching, not to control you, but to guard the unfolding of what heaven set in motion. There are moments in life not marked by noise, but by sudden silence. The day you were born was like that. After the first cry, there was a very brief but very deep pause, as if the room had just passed through an invisible door and closed it behind. No one said anything, yet everyone felt it. A sensation not belonging to logic, but settling somewhere in the chest, making people want to breathe deeper and at the same time afraid to move. Your mother felt it most clearly. Between the waves of pain, she suddenly entered a strange state. Not panic, not confusion, but the stillness of someone standing before something sacred. She heard a whisper, not coming from the air, but rising within. Protect this child. There was no specific voice, no face revealed, yet the command was so clear it needed no explanation. She did not ask why. Her soul understood before her mind could respond. There are missions not assigned in writing, but engraved directly into instinct. From that moment on, your mother knew there were things that could not be spoken, not out of fear, but because the time had not yet come. Her later silence was not distance, but a veil. She kept things hidden not to shield you from the truth, but to keep the truth from being exposed before you were strong enough to carry it. In that room, there was another presence she only caught a glimpse of. A woman with silver hair, standing very close, placing a hand on her shoulder like a familiar gesture. No name tag, no introduction, just a brief sense of reassurance, then gone when she blinked. Later, your mother wondered if it had been an illusion of exhaustion, but her soul never doubted. There are truths that do not need proof to exist. When you were brought into the light, there was a moment when those around felt they were standing in the wrong place, as if they had accidentally stepped into a space not meant for them. A nurse entered the room. Though it was not her assignment, a decision was made in an instant, not based on procedure, but on intuition. Later, no one remembered why they did it, yet that very moment kept you exactly where you needed to be. Psalm 34 once said that the angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him. That line speaks not only of protection from the outside, but guidance from within. There are actions humans believe are spontaneous, but in truth are the result of a deeper prompting, where human will and heaven's intention meet in silence. You did not know this as a child, but your body knew. Perhaps that is why you never fully slept in the first months of life. Your eyes wide open, gazing into space as if listening to something, not out of fear, but because your soul had not yet fully released the thread connecting it to the place it had just left. You were receiving final instructions, things that could not be passed on through human language. Those around you called it sensitivity, but that sensitivity was not weakness. It was a sign that the veil had not yet fully closed. And because of that, your presence began to create very different reactions. Some felt peace holding you, Others felt restless, as if something within them had been touched that they were not ready to face. If you have listened this far and feel something gently stirring within you, do not push it away. Some stories are not told to persuade, but to awaken. You do not need to believe right away. Just listen. And if you wish to leave a sign that you are here, that you are feeling, leave a few lines to share, not to prove anything, but to acknowledge to yourself that you are no longer hearing this story with indifference. And if you want to continue walking this path, stay. There are pieces ahead waiting for the right one. After the day you were born, the air in that room never fully returned to what it was. There was a very subtle disturbance, like ripples after something large has sunk beneath the surface. No one spoke of it, but a few carried that feeling for many years. A nurse later wrote in her personal journal that her hands felt warm when she touched you, as if holding something not made of matter. She never dared tell anyone, but that memory never faded. Your mother cried a great deal afterward, not from pain, but from a feeling she could not name. She called it postpartum exhaustion. But deeper than that, it was the response of a soul that had just witnessed something beyond expression. There are memories the human mind is not allowed to keep for long, not because they are false, but because they are too vast. In the months before you were born, your mother dreamed dreams she never shared, a white lion circling her belly, a fire that burned without consuming, a figure standing at the foot of the bed in the very early hours of morning. These images were not explained, only felt, and she understood, in her own way, that she had been chosen not only to give birth to a child, but to bring something into this world. You do not carry these memories in your mind, but your soul carries them in its rhythm, in how you respond to injustice, in the urge you feel to stand up when others choose silence. From the beginning, your presence was designed to shift the balance, not loudly, not dramatically, but enough to make what is out of balance begin to show. This story is not leading you toward a title. It is leading you back to a memory, and that memory, though covered for many years, has never disappeared. It has only been waiting for the right moment to be named. After you were taken out of the delivery room, the air in that area did not return to what it was before. There was a very slight misalignment, as if everything was still trying to recalibrate after witnessing something beyond its routine. Those present that day continued their work, but a few gazes lingered longer than usual, as if they had seen something they did not know how to name. You lay there, silent, but your silence was not empty. It carried weight. Just above that small body, there was something invisible to the naked eye, a record not made of paper, not written in ink, but formed of light. It did not open to be read, but to be confirmed. Some souls arrive in the world carrying light luggage. You arrived carrying a map, not to lose your way, but to guide. And the presence of that map drew the attention of the realms. 3 reactions unfolded at the same time, though no one in the room was aware. One side welcomed with reverence. One side quietly observed, preparing tests. And another side withdrew in anger, because this moment disrupted old calculations. When you took your first breath, an invisible cord was cut. A chain of bindings that had clung to your family bloodline for many generations suddenly lost its anchor. Your father stood there, unaware that something within his own lineage had just been rewritten. There were blessings he carried without ever fully understanding them. And there were burdens he had grown used to carrying, believing they were normal. But the moment you were born, that balance shifted, not through force, but through authority. What had once taken deep root could not remain before light arriving at the appointed time. In that room, the energy rose quickly and then settled. The lights flickered for a brief beat. A medical device paused and then resumed. The heart rate on the monitor stopped for exactly 3 seconds. then continued as if nothing had happened. No one reported an incident. No one wanted to ask questions. But the soul of one nurse remembered clearly. She felt her hands grow warm when she touched you, not a burning heat, but a living warmth with a pulse. Later, she wrote about it in a notebook no one else would read. She wrote that the child gripped her finger tightly, as if holding something unseen. She also wrote that in that moment, she felt herself standing very close to something ancient, and that feeling was both beautiful and unsettling. Not because of danger, but because truth often makes people tremble when they are not ready. Psalm 91 once said, "Those who dwell under the shadow of the Most High will be protected. They will rest under the shadow of the Almighty." Those words were not spoken in the delivery room, but they were at work there. The protection was not loud, not dramatic, but absolute. Not to isolate you from the world, but to ensure you would live long enough to complete what you carried. Your mother felt that shift clearly when she held you for the first time. Her tears did not follow ordinary emotional rhythms, not from relief, and not entirely from joy. It was the response of a body that had just become a bridge for something beyond understanding. She tried to name the feeling as postpartum exhaustion, as hormones, as pressure, but deeper down, she knew something sacred had passed through her, leaving a mark her memory was not permitted to hold in full. In the first weeks of life, you did not sleep like other children, not because of discomfort, but because you were listening. Your eyes wide open in the darkness, as if something was still speaking to you while the world believed you knew nothing. Your soul had not fully cut the thread connecting it to the place you had just left. You were receiving final instructions, things that could not be transmitted through words. There were nights when your mother heard very soft footsteps near the crib. She jumped up, checked every corner of the room, and found no one. Nothing was disturbed, but the air was different, both cold and warm, a sensation impossible to explain, yet not threatening. She began to pray more, not by ritual, but by instinct, because when a soul touches the sacred, it often reaches for prayer before it reaches for reason. You grew up without remembering those nights, but your body remembers. That is why later you react strongly to silent spaces, why you sense the presence of others even before they speak, why you know something is wrong before it becomes visible. That is not imagination. It is a perception system formed very early, when the veil between realms was still thin. Not everyone welcomed your presence. There are invisible structures that have existed for a long time, built on no one remembering the truth. Your birth was like a reminder that some things were forgotten, not because they were wrong, but because they were powerful. And when powerful truth appears, it always creates reaction. This story has not yet spoken of the challenges you will face, but their foundation was laid right here. The day you were born did not only activate protection, it also awakened observation, not to watch you as a threat, but to see whether you would remember who you are. You may have grown up feeling that your life always carried a deeper layer, a level of meaning others did not touch. That is not imagination. It is the echo of a moment when time touched eternity, then continued moving as if it had never paused. And from that moment on, nothing in your life has ever been completely separate from the day you were born. Every turn, every collision, every time you stood up after breaking carries the imprint of a decision made very early, not to burden you, but to remind you that you have never walked alone. When you were brought home, everything looked normal, like any family welcoming a new life. But there were things not captured in family photos, not included in stories told later. The air in that house carried a different layer of vibration, very subtle but very real, as if a new current had just been introduced and the old foundation had not yet adapted. You lay in the small cradle while the world around you quietly adjusted. There were invisible threads that had existed in your family for a very long time, passed from one generation to the next without being named. They did not always appear as great tragedies. Sometimes they showed up as repeating patterns, fears with no clear origin, limits accepted as normal. People called it fate, family character, something everyone goes through. But the day you were born, one of those threads lost its pull. Not through resistance, but through presence. You did nothing. You simply arrived. And sometimes, arriving at the right moment is enough to shift the balance. Your first breath did not only sustain that small body, it also unsettled structures that had taken root too deeply in the bloodline. What was once believed unchangeable began to lose its absolute hold. Your father may not have noticed it right away. He was still himself, with familiar worries and unnamed responsibilities, but something in him began to shift very gently. An invisible pressure he had long carried suddenly eased, though he did not know why. Burdens inherited from ancestors that he thought were simply part of who he was began to crack. Not enough to vanish at once, but enough to no longer dominate as before. Psalm 25:14 once said that the Lord reveals his covenant to those who fear him. That covenant is not always revealed through words or visions. Sometimes it shows itself as a quiet change in the flow of a family. You were not born to carry every old wound, but you carry the authority to end what no longer needs to continue. Your mother sensed this in a different way. She began to notice that whenever she looked at you, something within her softened. Old worries lost their sharp edges. Painful memories that once clung to her no longer rose with the same intensity. She did not call it a miracle. She simply thought that becoming a mother had changed her. But deeper than that, her soul knew something was being healed through your presence. You did not need to understand this for it to take effect. The deepest changes often happen before the mind can catch up. Some nights, as you slept, the air around the cradle seemed thicker, as if something were standing guard, not in a way that caused fear, but in a way that made the space feel unusually calm. Your mother's dreams during this time also changed, less restless but deeper, as if a door had quietly closed behind old fears. You grew up in that atmosphere without knowing you were standing at a turning point. Things once accepted in your family began to be questioned, not through words, but through feeling. Some people felt lighter around you, others felt uneasy, as if your presence forced them to face what they had long avoided. You did nothing. You were simply yourself. There are forces that do not need to attack to create impact. They only need to stand there, in the right place, at the right time, and that is how you functioned, even when you were very small. Your presence was like a quiet reminder that some stories had not been fully told, some cycles not yet closed, not to reopen pain, but to allow endings to happen. You may have grown up without anyone telling you that you were doing something special, but your body reflects it, your sensitivity to other people's emotions, your ability to sense imbalance before it explodes, your discomfort with living inside falsehoods. That is not temperament. It is the sign of a soul tuned to recognize truth even before it is spoken. In your family, there may have been conflicts with no clear cause, distances that formed and then dissolved, changes no one directly connected to you, but reality knows. When an old cycle begins to dissolve, it rarely leaves in complete silence. Some shaking must occur for things to find a new position, and you, without intending to, stood at the center of that adjustment. What matters is that this does not place a burden on you to carry everything. You were not born to save everyone, but your presence creates conditions for truth to surface, for what has been suppressed to be seen. And when truth is seen, old cycles begin to lose their power. Perhaps that is why later in life you often felt responsible for things not entirely yours. A pull to step in, to speak, to protect, even when no one asked. That does not come from external pressure. It comes from a very early memory that your presence has impact, whether you intend it or not. But remember this: you are not required to bear every consequence of this change. You did not come to suffer on behalf of previous generations. You came to open a different path. That path is not always easy, but it has direction. And that direction was set from the day you were born. This story has not yet spoken of the greater challenges that will arise as you become more aware of who you are. But their foundation was laid here, in quiet changes no one named. The day you were born was not only a personal beginning, it was a turning point in a much longer story. And when these words reach you, it is a sign that part of that memory is ready to be remembered, not all at once, just enough for you to keep walking, with the understanding that you are not a random disruption, but a link placed exactly where it belongs. Time passed, and you grew up in a world that looked very ordinary. But beneath that surface, movements never stopped. You began to walk, began to speak your first words, began to learn how to exist within the human rhythm. But there was a part of you that never fully blended into that rhythm, not because you resisted, but because your soul still remembered another rhythm, deeper, slower, and more real. When you were very small, you often stared into empty space, long enough that adults would call your name and you would not respond right away. Your gaze was not vacant. It was focused, as if you were listening to something others could not hear. Sometimes you smiled for no reason, and other times you suddenly grew quiet, as if receiving a wave of emotion that did not belong to the present moment. People said it was just a child being a child, but your soul knew better. You did not sleep as deeply as other children. Your sleep was light, easily disturbed, as if you did not want to fully release awareness. There were nights you stayed awake for a long time, not crying, not restless, just lying still and looking at the ceiling, not because you feared the dark, but because darkness was not unfamiliar to you. It was simply another space, one you had passed through before coming here. Your mother noticed this in her own way. She began to feel that there was something about you that was not like other children. Not dangerous, not negative, just different. Sometimes when she held you, her mind would suddenly grow quiet, as if the noise in her head had paused. At other times, she felt a vague concern, not directed at you, but at the world outside, as if she sensed there were things not always friendly to the light you carried. Small phenomena appeared and disappeared, not large enough to become stories, but enough to plant an uneasy feeling in the adults. An object falling from a shelf when you cried, a room becoming unusually quiet when you entered, a stressed adult softening the moment you touched their hand. No one connected these events together, but they were not random. You reacted strongly to the emotions of others. When someone was sad, even without words, you felt it. When there was tension in the house, your body reflected it before any conversation began. You may have been called too sensitive, too easily affected, but that sensitivity was not a weakness. It was a tool, a sense finely tuned to perceive movements hidden beneath the surface. Some people in your family felt uncomfortable being around you for too long, not because you did anything wrong, but because your presence required them to face themselves. Things they were used to hiding, used to ignoring, became harder to avoid. Light does not need to speak to disturb darkness. It only needs to be there. Your mother, during those years, began to pray in a very instinctive way. Not because she feared something would happen to you, but because she felt entrusted with something beyond ordinary protection. She had no words for it. She only knew that there were nights she stood by your cradle for a long time, placing her hand on your chest, as if listening not only to your heartbeat, but to the rhythm of a longer story. You do not remember those moments with your mind, but they are imprinted in your body. That is why later you feel discomfort with falsehood, why you struggle to accept words that are not aligned with truth, why you feel drained when staying too long in environments filled with contradiction that no one dares to name. Your body reacts before your logic finds a reason. There were times you played alone, not because you were isolated, but because you needed space to process what you were sensing. In that quiet, you did not feel lonely. You felt familiar, as if this was your natural state before the world taught you to be louder, faster, more hidden. You carried the memory of a place where silence was not frightening, but full of information. The adults around you tried to name that difference in safe ways. They said you had a strong imagination. They said you were sensitive. They said you would grow up and everything would be fine. But none of them understood that this was not a phase to outgrow. This was a foundation laid very early, so that later, when you were older, you could stand firm among things others chose to avoid. There may have been a moment in your childhood when you saw or heard something others did not. A passing figure, a dream that felt too real, a sentence that echoed in your mind without knowing where it came from. When you spoke of it, adults smiled and said it was just imagination, and slowly, you learned to be silent, not because you forgot, but because you understood that not everyone was ready to hear. That silence became a survival skill, but it did not erase what you knew. It only pushed it deeper, waiting for the right time, and that time did not come early. It required you to grow, to collide with life, to experience enough loss to understand that truth is not always comfortable, but it is always necessary. Your early years passed this way, without major events to remember, yet filled with small signs accumulating. Each sign was a reminder that you were not only growing as a human, but learning how to carry a soul that had known more than this. And that soul never fell asleep. It was only patient. The story has not yet entered clear trials, but the foundation of awakening was laid in these seemingly ordinary years. You were not prepared for greatness in a loud way. You were prepared through sensitivity, through listening, through the ability to stand steady in silence while the world around you was not yet ready to name the truth. And as you listen now, you may begin to realize that the things that once made you feel different were not flaws. They were traces of a journey that began very early and never truly stopped. As you began to grow older, the world was no longer as gentle as it was in your early years. What once existed only as vague feelings slowly took shape as concrete experiences. You began to realize that your life did not move along a straight, predictable line. There were moments of grace that arrived quickly, as if every door opened at once. Then right after, unexpected collisions appeared, without warning, without explanation, leaving you breathless and confused. You wondered why your rhythm was always like this, why things rarely stayed still long enough for you to catch your breath. You called it chaos, but deeper than that, it was aftershock, the aftershock of a confrontation that began very early, before you had language to name it. What started on the day you were born did not end in the delivery room. It spread quietly through time, touching every stage of your life. Each step forward you took triggered a reaction, not because you sought conflict, but because your presence disturbed structures that had grown comfortable with silence. Within your family, there may have been relationships that became tense without anyone fully understanding why. Those who once held power, whether through words or emotional control, began to feel unsteady when you appeared, not because you challenged them, but because light does not need to argue to expose truth. Some avoided you not out of hatred, but because your presence reminded them of what they had lost or denied. You felt this clearly, even though no one spoke of it. There were glances that turned away, conversations that shortened when you entered the room, silences that stretched longer than usual. You did not understand why you caused such reactions. And at times, you wondered if something was wrong with you. But the truth is, nothing was wrong. Not everyone is ready to stand before the truth you carry without trying. Something had happened in your family line very quietly that was never told aloud. Someone, out of jealousy or fear, once tried to hinder your arrival, not through physical action, but through words, intentions, whispers in the dark meant to take root. But those words did not travel far. Protection arrived first, silently, decisively, cutting the chain of reaction before it could form. That person later avoided you, not out of hatred, but because deep down they knew their old authority had begun to crack the day you appeared. Some things exist only because no one questions them. And when a soul capable of seeing through enters the space, false stability cannot last. You did not come to take revenge. You came to end a cycle. Your name, the name spoken in this world, was not chosen in calm. It was decided under pressure during a time when your family was experiencing strong turbulence. You may have felt at times that you were not fully attached to that name, as if it were only an outer layer. And that is true, because there is another name not spoken in human language, a name spoken only once, in the moment your first cry rose, then hidden for protection. That name did not disappear. It exists as a very soft echo, surfacing in moments when you feel most aligned with yourself, in moments when you face difficult choices, in moments when you cannot compromise with what you know is wrong, even when the cost is high. That is not stubbornness. It is memory. You moved through your early years with more challenges than others, not always great challenges, but frequent ones, as if you were rarely allowed to walk on smooth ground for long. There were traps set along the way, not to destroy you, but to distract you, to make you doubt your intuition, to teach you to ignore the inner voice. And there were times when you almost believed your sensitivity was a burden. But even buried beneath disappointment or hurt, one thing never left you, a gentle yet persistent pull toward truth. You could run from it for a while, but you could not lose it. It appeared in questions that refused to stay silent, in the feeling that life must hold something deeper than what is presented, in the urge to stand up when you witness injustice, even when no one asks you to. Psalm 66 wrote that we went through fire and water, but you brought us to a place of abundance. That line does not promise an easy journey. It only affirms that the journey has direction. You were not thrown into trials blindly. Every collision carried purpose, even when that purpose was not immediately clear. There may have been a night when you were young, when everything felt like it was pressing in at once. You were tired, confused, and wondered if you were on the wrong path. But even in that moment, something held you in place. Not advice from outside, but a strange steadiness from within. You did not quit, not because you were stronger than others, but because you were not designed to leave midway. These years taught you how to stand in contradiction. They taught you that light is not always welcomed. They taught you that truth often unsettles before it frees. And most importantly, they taught you that the feeling of standing in the middle of an invisible battlefield was not imagination. It was a sign that you were standing in the right place. You were not born to live in confusion. You are living in the aftermath of a confrontation that began very early, and whether you name it or not, that confrontation continues, not to defeat you, but to see whether you remember who you are. What once tried to hinder you never fully disappeared, but it no longer stands as close as before. It watches from a distance, waiting to see whether you will return to your truth. And in this phase, as pressure increases, the memory of your soul begins to knock more strongly. You do not remember everything yet, but you begin to suspect that your life is not a random sequence. And that suspicion is the first step of awakening. There was a point in your life when everything began to change in a way that was hard to explain. Not because the outer circumstances suddenly shifted, but because inside you, a thin veil began to tremble. Things that had been pushed deep into silence no longer agreed to stay still. They did not rise as clear memories, but as scattered signals. A dream that felt too real, a familiar feeling when entering a place you had never been, an urge with no clear reason yet impossible to ignore. You began to realize that there were moments when you knew something was about to happen, even without any data to reason from. At times you paused in the middle of a decision because it felt not right, and only later understood that pause had saved you from a wrong turn. Before, you might have called it luck, but gradually you no longer believed it was random. A system within you was coming back online. Numbers started to appear in ways that caught your attention, not loudly, not forcefully, just repeating often enough that you could not ignore them. Among them, one number carried a very different feeling, as if it were not just a symbol, but a mark. 777. It appeared at moments when you stood between doubt and clarity, between old and new, between continuing to forget or beginning to remember. 777 did not come to make you special compared to others. It came as a confirmation that a cycle was closing and an awakening was completing. That number does not represent outer perfection, but inner completion. 3 sevens are not random repetition, but the rhythm of a soul that has traveled far enough to return to the right place. When 707 appears, it does not ask you to do anything. It asks only one simple question: are you ready to remember? And if that number resonates with you in a way that is hard to describe, leave a sign of that resonance, not to prove anything, but to acknowledge to yourself that you are listening. Along with these signals, your dreams began to change. They were no longer just chaotic fragments. There was structure in them. There was a sense of moving through spaces that did not belong to the present. You woke up with a strange fatigue, as if you had been working somewhere else, not in this physical world. And there were also mornings when you woke with sudden clarity, even though you could not remember exactly what you had dreamed. You may have tried to dismiss these things, telling yourself you were over-interpreting, but the more you tried to ignore them, the clearer they became, because this was not imagination. This was memory finding its way back, not by rushing in directly, but by slipping through the cracks of everyday life. Psalm 85 wrote, "I will listen to what God the Lord says, for he speaks peace to his people." That line does not say the voice will always be loud. Sometimes it comes very softly, enough to make you doubt, but also enough that you cannot forget it. You are not called to hear with your ears. You are called to hear through stillness. There were times when you felt a stronger need to be alone than before, not because you disliked the world, but because the world was too loud for you to tell which voice was real. You began to seek quiet, not as an escape, but as a necessity. In that quiet, you did not feel empty. You felt full, as if something inside you was being rearranged, layer by layer, without haste. People around you may have noticed the change before you could name it yourself. Some said you had become quieter. Some said you were harder to read. Some felt you carried a different weight, not heavy, but deep. Your presence began to have a stronger impact. Even without effort, your words, when you chose to speak, carried more weight. And your silence, when you chose silence, did as well. You were no longer easily drawn into falsehoods as before. Conversations that were not genuine tired you more quickly. Environments built on competition and concealment triggered clear reactions in your body. You no longer endured as well as you once did, not because you had grown weaker, but because your soul no longer accepted what went against the truth it was beginning to remember. Something important was happening in this phase. Invisible contracts that had bound your family bloodline began to loosen, not because someone came to break them from the outside, but because you carried the authority to end them from within. What had once been accepted because there was no choice now stood before the possibility of reversal, and that possibility created resistance. You began to notice that each time you moved closer to your truth, pressure increased as well, not to stop you, but to test you, to see if you would return to familiar doubt, to see if you would choose false safety over real clarity. But something had changed. This time you were no longer alone, not because someone appeared visibly, but because you had begun to stand in the right position within a larger picture. You do not need to remember everything at once. Soul memory does not work like ordinary memory. It returns according to the rhythm of maturity. Each time you choose truth over convenience, a peace returns each time you listen to intuition instead of fear. A veil thins, and each time you remain in stillness long enough, you step further into yourself. You may not yet be able to name everything that is happening, but you are no longer completely unaware as before. You begin to sense that your life is not a random sequence of reactions, but a journey marked by very specific signals. And 707 is not the end point. It is a marker showing that you have traveled far enough to begin returning. You do not need to rush. You do not need to prove anything. You only need to keep listening. Because what is awakening within you does not come to create disorder. It comes to rearrange. And that rearrangement, though sometimes uncomfortable, always leads back to truth. When the awakening becomes clearer, you realize there is no way to return to how things were before. Not because the world has changed, but because the way you see the world has changed. What once confused you now begins to reveal its true shape. You are no longer drawn to empty promises or paths that look safe but lack life. A quiet adjustment takes place within you, as if an old compass is being recalibrated to point toward the direction it was always meant to point. You begin to see clearly that you were never created to fit neatly into existing molds. Systems built on fear, control, or pretense no longer hold you as they once did, not because you are rebellious, but because your soul no longer agrees to bow to what goes against truth. There are moments when you try to return to the old way of living, only to realize that your body can no longer tolerate it. Fatigue arrives faster, discomfort becomes clearer. This is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of alignment. You do not need to speak loudly to have impact. In fact, the deeper you move into awakening, the less you speak. But when you do speak, your words carry a different weight. Not the weight of persuasion, but of presence. There are rooms that change when you enter, even if you do nothing special. There are conversations that shift direction when you are there, as if truth can no longer find a place to hide. This does not always make you liked, but it makes you impossible to ignore. You begin to understand why you were once called too sensitive, not because you feel too much, but because you feel in the right places. You sense misalignment before it becomes crisis. You feel falsehood before it is exposed. You know when a relationship is rooted in truth and when it survives through avoidance. This makes you uncomfortable with half measures, not because you are demanding, but because you no longer want to live in contradiction. Some people begin to drift away from you during this phase, not because you hurt them, but because your clarity forces them to face things they are not ready to see. Their leaving may bring sadness, but it does not pull you back. Because at a deeper level, you know that every space created is making room for something more real. You do not lose the right connections. You only release what has completed its role. You also begin to see that challenges no longer come to break you, but to refine you, each time you stand firm in your truth. An old layer of fear loses its power. Each time you choose silence over explanation, an old cycle closes. You no longer need to prove that you are right. Truth stands on its own, and you learn to trust that. There are moments when you feel very clearly that you are being guided, not in a dramatic way, but in ordinary life. A meeting that happens at the right time, a delay that feels inconvenient but later reveals itself as protection, a door that does not open, forcing you to turn, only for you to realize that if it had opened, you would not be where you needed to be. These things no longer surprise you. You begin to expect alignment rather than resist it. At the same time, you also feel resistance more clearly, not always from the outside. Sometimes it comes from old habits, familiar doubts, recurring questions in your mind asking whether you are imagining too much. But each time doubt rises, something deeper holds you steady, a knowing that does not require proof. You cannot return to sleep once you are awake. You begin to understand that you were not sent here to soothe darkness. You were sent here to reveal it, not through direct confrontation, but through uncompromising presence. Your light does not need to be dazzling. It only needs to be real. And that truth dissolves structures built on deception, even when the process is not comfortable. Some people begin to come to you to open their hearts, not because you offer advice or solutions, but because they feel able to speak truth when they are near you. You do not try to heal them, but the space around you allows them to see themselves more clearly. This is both a gift and a responsibility. Not the responsibility to save everyone, but the responsibility to keep that space free from ego or the need for recognition. You also learn to protect your energy more wisely, not by building walls, but by choosing carefully. You no longer feel the need to explain your intuition. When something is not right, you step back. When something is true, you stay. This simplicity brings you a sense of ease you rarely had before. You are no longer pulled in every direction at once. You begin to move more directly, even when the path is not always easy to see. Something very important happens during this phase. You begin to realize that awakening is not an explosive moment, but a stabilizing process. The further you go, the clearer you become, not more confused. This clarity does not erase fear, but it puts fear in its proper place. You no longer let it drive, you let it sit in the back seat, listening, but not deciding. You also begin to see that you were not meant to carry this journey alone. There are people who appear at the right time, not to save you, but to reflect you. They do not always stay long, but each one brings a piece, a question, a confirmation, a reminder that you are not off course. These meetings are not loud, but they leave lasting marks. The closer you move toward your truth, the more clearly you sense that something is waiting ahead, not as a reward, but as a point of convergence. A place where what you have lived through begins to connect into a meaningful picture. You do not see the whole picture yet, but you have seen enough to not turn back. You may still have tired days, moments of doubt, nights when you wonder if you are going too far, but something has changed permanently. You no longer feel lost within yourself. Even if the world around you has not caught up, you have begun to stand firmly in your own truth. And it is at this moment, when you are no longer desperately searching for signs, that what remains begins to come to you on its own, not to convince you, but to confirm that this journey is not imagined. It began very early, and now it is entering a new phase. There is a very strange moment that arrives when you stop trying to search for answers. Not because you know everything, but because you are steady enough to stand inside the question without fear. It is exactly then that everything begins to rearrange itself. Not loudly, not explosively, just a very deep alignment. Like when something finally finds the exact place it was always meant to occupy. You begin to understand that you are not becoming someone else. You are returning to a truth that was once covered, not to punish, but to protect. What your mother did not say was not an absence of love. It was the instinct of someone who had felt the weight of what she witnessed. She understood that some stories, if told too early, would attract unnecessary attention. And you, from the very beginning, were born carrying enough light that you did not need to be exposed too soon. Now, as you stand at this stage of your life, the pieces begin to fit together. The recurring dreams, the memories with no clear origin, the way your heart tightens at injustice others consider normal. None of it feels scattered anymore. It connects into a single current. You no longer ask why you are different. You begin to understand that the difference itself is the instrument. There are marks on your body, perhaps a birthmark, a scar, or a very small detail you never paid attention to. They are not random. They are symbols, not meant for the outside eye, but for inner memory. No one else needs to see them for them to matter. It is enough that you remember you were never created carelessly. Psalm 126 once wrote, "The Lord has done great things for us, and we are filled with joy." That line is not about surface happiness. It speaks of the moment when a soul realizes that nothing it has lived through was wasted. The sleepless nights, the moments of feeling misplaced, the times you felt too different to belong. All of it was part of a process guiding you back to the right place. You begin to sense guidance more clearly, not through commands, but through agreement. Your body reacts faster to what is not true. Your heart opens more easily to what is pure. You no longer need to control everything to feel safe. You learn to trust alignment, not out of naivety, but because you have seen too much evidence to keep doubting. Some people in your family begin to look at you differently, not because they understand everything, but because their souls recognize something familiar and deep. Your mother may not say it, but sometimes her gaze lingers on you longer than before, not with worry, but with a quiet recognition that some things cannot be held forever. At a certain point, what was protected must be returned to the one who carries it. You also realize that you were not called to make yourself smaller, not in the sense of seeking attention, but in the sense of not shrinking out of fear of causing disturbance. Your presence has always created movement, not to destroy, but to reorder. You do not need to force change. Simply standing in your rightful place allows what no longer fits to fall away. You may still have tired days. You may sometimes wish you were simpler, less sensitive. But now you know you were not born to live numb. You were born to feel, to discern, to remain centered while moving through opposing currents without losing yourself. When you look back, you see that even losses created the space necessary for what was right to enter. Doors that once closed were not rejecting you. They were redirecting you. You did not arrive late. You are arriving at the exact moment your soul remembered long ago. A different kind of peace appears when you stop chasing validation from the outside. Not because you no longer need connection, but because you no longer trade your truth to keep it. You learn to move more slowly, to look more deeply, to listen more carefully. And in that slowing down, you realize that the Sarah does not always appear in big moments. It often hides in the most ordinary details. You do not need to wait for another sign to begin living as someone who remembers. Your presence itself is the sign. On the day you were born, the realms shifted. And now, as you remember, that shift continues to ripple outward, not with thunder, but with very real changes in your life and in the lives of those who encounter you. This story does not end here, because you were not created to listen and then stop. You were created to carry this memory into each morning, each relationship, each small decision you once thought did not matter. It is in those small things that the light you carry finds its place. You are not waiting for a calling from heaven. That call was answered the moment you released your first cry. What remains is to walk in that truth, without haste, without display, but without turning away. And as you do, the world around you, slowly or quickly, will adjust, not because you force it, but because truth carries its own weight. You do not carry this story to keep it for yourself. You carry it to live it. And as long as you live in alignment, the story will continue to be written, not through words, but through your presence.
Grateful that you chose to spend these moments in the light of this story. If it touched your soul, please like, share, and subscribe, and ring the bell so the next whisper of light may find its way back to you.